The 12 black cars arrived at exactly the same time. It was as if someone had planned it. 12 doors opening, 12 women stepping out into the cold morning air of Ironvale City. Each one was dressed perfectly. Each one carried herself like she had already won something. The iron gates of the royal palace stood open wide, and the guards at the entrance stood still and straight, watching in silence. From a high window on the 3rd floor, King Caden watched too. He stood with his arms crossed, his coffee growing cold in his hand. He watched the women walk in one by one, confident, graceful, and beautiful in ways that made sense for their packs. Marin of the North Fang pack walked like the ground belonged to her. Priya of the Sunridge pack smiled at one of the guards, and the guard actually smiled back, which almost never happened. Eloise of the Westmere pack wore a red coat and said nothing to anyone, which somehow made everyone look at her. Caden turned away from the window before the last car even opened its door. "They are here," said Oren, his beta, standing near the doorway. Oren was a calm man with steady eyes, and he had been Caden's closest friend since they were boys. "I know," Caden said. "You're supposed to greet them in the East Hall." "I know that too." Oren said nothing more. He had learned, over many years, when to speak and when to simply wait. Caden set his cold coffee down on the window ledge and walked toward the door. He did not know about the van. While the 12 black cars were being parked in the guest courtyard, a gray cargo van had quietly pulled into the service bay on the east side of the palace. It was old. One of its headlights was slightly darker than the other, flickering a little each time the engine was running. The van had no logo on its side, no shine on its paint. It looked like it belonged somewhere else entirely. The woman driving it turned off the engine, stepped out, and started unloading crates without looking around much. She had brown work boots, dark trousers, and a green jacket that had seen too many winters. Her name was Sarah Voss, and she had a delivery scheduled for 9 in the morning, which meant she was already 4 minutes late and not happy about it. She stacked the crates onto a flatbed cart, checked her delivery slip, tucked it back into her jacket pocket, and pushed the cart toward the service corridor door. She was a wolf without a pack, what people called a rogue born. She had been one her whole life, which meant she had grown up in the spaces between worlds, never quite belonging to any of them. It had not been easy, but she had built a quiet, real, working life, and that life was hers, and she was proud of it. She was not thinking about any of that as she pushed her cart through the corridor. She was thinking about the left headlight. The first time Caden saw her, he nearly walked into her cart. He had slipped out of the East Hall between the first and second formal greetings. He needed 2 minutes alone. The selection had barely started, and he already felt the familiar heaviness in his chest, the one that came whenever he had to perform being a king instead of simply being himself. The service corridor was quiet and dim. He walked fast, his mind somewhere else, and then there was a cart in his path, and a woman behind it who said, without any particular alarm, "Sorry, coming through." She had one earbud in. She was not looking at him. She adjusted the angle of her cart around him with the easy efficiency of someone who had moved things through narrow spaces 100 times before, and she kept walking. Caden stood still. He watched her go down the corridor, push through a door, and disappear. He stood there for another moment. Then he went back to the East Hall and smiled at 12 women who had been waiting for him, and he thought, very briefly, about headphone cords and green jackets. The selection events were designed to impress. There were formal dinners with long tables, and more glasses than any one person needed. There were ceremonial hunts through the forest to the north of the palace, where everyone was meant to run free and show their strength. There were alliance meetings where the 12 women proved, repeatedly, that they were intelligent and capable and deeply serious about their pack's futures. Caden was present for all of it. He listened carefully. He asked good questions. He was, by every visible measure, engaged. He felt nothing that he could honestly call real. Marin sat across from him at the third dinner and spoke about the North Fang trade agreements with a clarity and confidence that he genuinely admired. Priya walked beside him during the second hunt and made him laugh twice, which was not an easy thing to do. Eloise watched him across rooms with eyes that saw more than she said out loud. These were remarkable women, he knew that. He was not pretending otherwise. But something was wrong, and he could not name it yet. He started finding reasons to walk the service corridor. He told himself it was habit. It was shorter than the main hallway. It was quieter. These were all true things. The second time he saw Sarah, she was arguing quietly with herself about whether a crate was too heavy for one trip, or if she could manage it. She decided she could manage it. She could not quite manage it. He held the door open without being asked, and she nodded once and said, "Thanks," and walked through, like he was simply someone who had been useful. The third time, she was on a short break in the narrow break room at the end of the corridor, sitting on a bench with her eyes closed and her boots crossed at the ankle. She opened her eyes when he came in, looked at him without any particular expression, and said, "The kitchen on the left side is faster if you need something at night. The right kitchen takes forever." He had not asked. She had simply offered it, like someone sharing useful information with a stranger. He sat down across from her and said, "How do you know that?" "I've been making deliveries here for 6 months," she said. "You learn things." They talked for 9 minutes, about nothing in particular. About the way the palace felt different at night, and how the east corridor always smelled like old wood, and whether the break room vending machine had ever actually worked. He could not remember the last time he had talked about nothing in particular. He went back to his advisors feeling, for the first time in weeks, like he had taken a full breath. The mate bond announced itself on a Thursday evening. Caden was seated at the head of the long dining table, surrounded by 12 women and their pack representatives, and 6 of his senior advisors, when it happened. It was not a sound, it was not exactly a feeling either. It was more like a shift, like something inside him that had been held very still finally moved, and it moved toward the kitchen door. Through the kitchen door, at that exact moment, Sarah was carrying a supply crate to the back storage room. She did not know what happened in the dining hall. She was thinking about the fact that her delivery schedule the next morning started at 7, and she needed to leave the palace by 6, and she had not yet fixed the headlight. Caden set down his fork. "Are you all right?" Oren asked quietly from his seat to the left. "Yes," Caden said. "Excuse me for a moment." He was not all right, exactly. He was something more complicated than all right. He was the most awake he had felt in years. He told her 3 days later. He came to the service bay in the early morning, before her shift started, before anyone else was around. She was checking something under the hood of the van. She looked up when she heard his footsteps, and wiped her hands on a cloth. "You're the Alpha King," she said. "You know I know that." "I know," he said. "Then you know this is strange," she said. "You coming here at 6 in the morning." He told her plainly. He told her about the mate bond. He told her he had known for 3 days, and he had spent those 3 days trying to decide whether to say nothing, and he had found that he could not choose silence. Not about this. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she told him what she was. No pack. No family name that carried weight. No political value. She told him about her niece, Lyrian, 6 years old, who Sarah was raising alone. She told him that her world was small, and concrete, and real, and that she had built it carefully, and she would not watch it fall apart for a bond he was capable of walking away from. She looked at him steadily and asked him to leave her alone. He did. He lasted 4 days. On the 5th day, he walked into the grand selection hall, where all 12 women were assembled. The room was full of quiet tension. Everyone was waiting. He stood at the head of the room and looked at the faces before him. Marin, composed and watchful. Priya, warm but worried. Eloise, completely still. 11 others, all of them present, all of them waiting for a decision they had earned the right to receive. He said, "I cannot choose from this room." Nobody moved. He asked for 3 days. He found Sarah loading the van. Her contract ended in 2 days. She had already arranged a new job in another city. She had done it quietly and efficiently. The same way she did everything. She was not running. She was simply leaving, which is what people do when a chapter ends. He opened the passenger door and sat down. She did not tell him to get out. That was something. He did not make a speech. He told her what it had cost him to wear the crown since he was 19, not for sympathy, but because she deserved honesty. He told her he was tired of choosing the version of his life that looked correct from the outside. He told her he was not asking her to become something she was not. He was asking if she would let him figure things out beside her, with her, in whatever way was actually real. Sarah sat with her hands on the steering wheel for a long time. Then she said, "Do you know how to change a headlight?" "No," he said. She got out of the car. He followed. She showed him how. It was not easy after that. Caden spent weeks in difficult political negotiations, offering the 12 packs stronger individual treaties to replace the old selection tradition, which he formally ended. Marin of the North Fang pack, who was the sharpest political mind in the room, became his strongest ally in making it work. 2 packs challenged his authority and lost. Several took months to calm down. His advisors were exhausted. He did the work. He did not complain about it. Sarah did not move into the palace quietly and accept whatever was given to her. She negotiated her own terms, in her own words. She kept working. She built the fleet management system for all royal logistics from the ground up, because the old one was a disaster, and nobody had fixed it. She brought Lyrian to the palace on weekends, and Lyrian called Orin the tall, sad man, which Orin did not know how to respond to. There were hard months. There were moments when the 2 worlds they came from felt very far apart. There were council members who were dismissive, and Caden shut that down each time with a quiet, flat authority that left no room for argument. There were moments when Sarah felt out of place, and she said so, and they talked about it, which was better than pretending. The final morning was a Tuesday, which is what most real things turn out to be. Sarah was in the service garage by 7, reviewing fleet schedules for the week. Caden had a council meeting at 8. He stopped in the garage on his way, the way he had started doing most mornings. She handed him coffee without looking up. He leaned against the van. They talked about Lyrian's school play, which was in 2 weeks, and whether the role of a tree was better or worse than a cloud. And Sarah said firmly that a tree was a better role because trees had more presence. At the gate, a new guard nearly stopped Caden from entering the service area. He was new and following rules, which was correct. Sarah appeared behind Caden, saw what was happening, and said simply to the guard, without any ceremony at all, "He's with me." The guard stepped aside. Caden walked through the gate. He smiled about that for the rest of the day, quietly, to himself, in a way that nobody in the council meeting understood, but nobody asked about either. He was, for the first time in a very long time, exactly where he was supposed to be.